My eyes snapped open, but the overhead view felt completely alien. Frigid morning rays bled across the floorboards as the bedside candles finally gave up. I attempted a simple roll, but my body felt like it was fused to the bedding. These weren't my hands. They were translucent claws, decorated with a web of blue veins. My lungs felt like parched paper, turning every inhale into an exhausting chore. When I tried to groan, the sound that emerged was a dry, haunting rattle. Suddenly, 14 years of a stranger's life flooded my brain with overwhelming force. My name was Carl Blumenthal, a boy whose life began where his mother's ended. Dad had been a ghost in that chair for 48 hours while Liesel played medic. Blurred flashes of foul medicine and agonizing, hacking fits burned through my mind. 5 years of waste, with the last 8 months spent rotting in these sour-smelling sheets. The truth hurt. I was a 14-year-old prince of dirt trapped in a dying body. It took 3 agonizing tries before my toothpick legs could actually support me. I was frail, yet that internal furnace of the fever had finally gone cold. The invisible vice grip on my chest broke, letting me finally draw a real breath. I clawed my way across the room, desperate to catch a glimpse of the outside. Beyond the farm animals, I saw Liesel approaching with another tray of worthless junk. Her gaze locked on mine, and she dropped the tray, shattering everything across the floor. She froze for 3 full seconds, her lips moving in a frantic, terrified prayer. "You're back," she whispered, while 2 girls stared from the hall like they'd seen a ghost. Sobbing replaced her words, but my eyes remained glued to the distant skyline. I saw a walking skeleton in the reflection. "Feed me, bring everything in the kitchen." Their mourning flipped to pure joy, and a spark of real life finally hit my soul. Heinrich stormed in, a massive man who'd spent years tiptoeing around my deathbed. He locked up instantly, his jaw hitting the floor at the sight of me on my feet. He tackled me into a trembling bear hug that nearly snapped my ribs. I just stood there, absorbing the pure desperation and agony vibrating off him. A sudden, aggressive knock broke the moment, and Dad looked like he'd been shot. Some kid stood in the hallway, looking like he'd crawled through 10 miles of mud. He was strangling his hat, his eyes glued to his boots in total shame. Bad crops and 4,000 gold owed to a loan shark named Eisenstadt in 90 days. 200 in, 600 out. The math was simple, and the outcome was disaster. "That's enough," I barked. The kid jumped, and Dad looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Lay it out for me, the full balance, the due date, and the payroll numbers." The room went silent before he stammered. 4,000 gold, 90 days, 80 men, sir." I just nodded. Dad reached for his jacket, clearly planning to go plead for mercy. "Give it 24 hours, I snapped. "I'm checking the grounds before we start groveling." He stared, utterly baffled by the sudden, cold command in my tone. Years of helplessness had broken him. He just nodded and sighed. "Fine." Kurt had been running this sinking ship for 11 years, and it showed in his eyes. He shadowed me like a worried nanny, waiting for me to keel over. "Don't stop," I said. "I want to see every single acre we still own." We eventually hit the property line where the old rock quarry was tucked away. 2 kilometers to the east, the ground dropped away into a massive, jagged crater. Thick weeds strangled the mouth of the pit, blocked by timber that had rotted in place. Kurt's voice sounded like grinding gravel. 6 years of decay. The owners fled, the crew vanished, and were left staring at the wreckage. I leaned in. The stonework was solid, but the timber frames had snapped. 1 weak brace and the whole thing collapsed, looking like a picked clean ribcage. "There is a fortune buried in this mess if you've got the stomach for the work." "Get me to the water," I barked. We spurred the horses toward the remains of the old bridge. 2 broken stone towers stood like headstones, separated by 30 meters of swirling, brown sludge. "The floods took it 2 years back," Kurt noted. "It used to be the region's heart. Now people take a 30-kilometer detour just to skip the rot." I checked the stone. Solid. The original builders knew their business. They meant for this to last forever. The base was anchored deep and untouched. Bringing it back wouldn't require a total overhaul. We just have to finish their work. That 30-kilometer bypass is draining my savings with every single mile. "Next, the bog," I ordered. Kurt's face went pale, like a man heading for the noose. "Sir, that land is tainted. Then I'll walk the edge myself." We turned south toward the mire. A 1-kilometer stretch of oily black liquid lay there, reeds sticking up like matted hair under a sulfur sky. The groaning wood and the sound of frogs covered up something stalking us through the brush. "Nothing survives here," Kurt whispered. "Even a hungry wolf stays clear of this cemetery." I poked the black sludge, thousands of years of rot pressed into a thick, foul grease. "Drain this and you have 50 kilometers of top-tier soil." "That smell isn't a ghost. It is just biology." "Niederbach," I whispered. 12 homes left. The rest are either buried or long gone. Just the hollowed-out bones of a town that used to have a pulse. A dozen families living in a 40-house ghost town. I mapped the ruins while Kurt talked for 4 hours. On the ride back, the math started working. 80 laborers left, 5 dead villages. Only 40% of the land is producing. The wells are bone dry. Broken bridges, toxic bogs, and roads that either swallow your men or snap your wheels. Down 4,000 gold. Income, 200. Costs, 600. I have 40 gold left in the vault. Losing 400 a year with 90 days to find 4,000. I felt the weight of those numbers. This isn't a disaster. It is just an equation with a timer. Kurt's jaw dropped. "Every lock has a key," I told him. "Keep riding." We hit Annerfeld. The stench hit me like a brick wall. A river of waste cut right through the town center. No drainage, no plumbing, not a single pipe in the ground. A stream of filth leaked past doors into a toxic pool behind the old mill. It sat 8 meters from the town well. I watched the slime from my saddle. "Kurt?" "Yes, sir, they actually drink this? They have no choice." "How many died in July?" He went silent. "Every season, mostly the kids. 4 last summer, 2 the year before." I stared at the well. 8 meters. That poison is leaking directly into the drinking water. Close enough that 10 years of filth has tainted every drop they swallow. This is the real murderer. A fever is a quick strike. This is a slow, quiet reaper that kills without saying a word. "New plan," I barked. "Forget the bridges. Fix this rot." Kurt blinked. "The sewers? Seal them in stone, cap the well, and move the waste miles away from the source. Every town gets the same fix. We have the men and the tools." I turned the horse. "Who is the best stoneworker around here?" Kurt bit his lip. "Werner. His back is broken, but his work is legendary." "Let's move." We rode to Werner's farm, but the edge of his field made me pull the reins hard. The wheat was planted in perfect lines. From up here, the tragedy was impossible to miss. The west side was booming bright green, thick and heavy with grain. The east side was a graveyard of withered husks and parched, broken earth. A cemetery of shriveled stalks. I spat. Kurt stared blankly at the dust. "Total wipeout, boss." I glared at the scorched horizon. "Just burnt remains," he croaked. The dirt was melting my soles. That water in the distance looked like a cruel trick of the mind. 100 yards away, the river cut through the valley, taunting us with a lush paradise on the opposite bank. Fortune favored the west side. Even in a drought, they sucked the aquifer dry just to keep their lawns emerald. We were basically ruling over a tomb of silt. "How fast is our bank account bleeding out?" I snapped. "Usually 30%, but this sun, it will eat half our yield by the weekend." A 400-yard trench was our only shot left. "Drain the basin," I growled. "We are hijacking that current." I could see the heavy gates and timber dams redirecting the flow. Kurt did not make a sound. "We blew 120 gold on dead grain." I snarled. "What is the tab for the infrastructure?" He looked defeated, his expression hollow. "Who knows?" Back home, my father paced the halls like a restless spirit. He had been stationary for 12 hours, trapped in a quiet desperation that felt like lead. His glass sat full and forgotten. I shoved my rough sketches directly into his line of sight. Messy calculations and frantic logic I had hashed out while the livestock had their last drink. "That is where we die," I whispered, gesturing to the dust. "But this plan? This is how we rise." I glanced at the grime. The local bureaucratic sludge was a slow death sentence for us. Corpses do not forge legacies. They are just compost for the soil they failed to protect. 2 years of being the local punchline. Folding was a fate worse than death. We were not finished. All we had was grit and sweat. No machinery. Just 15 gold for some wood and metal. 42 days of absolute agony. Then we break ground. 400 yards to freedom. Triple timber gates to seize the flow, making that water work for us for once. Clearing 120 gold annually. The price tag? Nothing but broken bones and heavy lifting. 60 days later, we restore the bridge. That path used to be the region's main artery. Currently, 60 trucks a month waste a 30-kilometer loop. We are ending that detour. A single passage. Then we collect. 3 gold per semi, 1 for the locals. A solid 25 gold every month. Once the cash flows, that stone pit turns into a gold mine. Half a dozen guys turning gravel into capital. That buys everything we have ever wanted. My father sat motionless, the tension thick. He studied my designs like a loaded weapon. 40 gold is everything we have left, he croaked. I agreed. 15 for the canal, 25 for the overpass. I moved closer. We're on a tightrope. One slip-up in 2 months and we lose the roof over our heads. If we stay cautious, the bank will be auctioning our furniture by July. Carl, he murmured, you almost died. I have seen the other side already. I cut him off. He looked at me, torn between a prayer for a fix and the fear his son had lost his mind. He resembled someone parched who was suddenly struggling to keep his head above water. Where is Werner? I yelled. The blueprints were ready, but time was bleeding out. No fancy office, just a lifted pen and a salvaged straightedge. I sketched our survival plan on the reverse side of a foreclosure notice. I calculated the slope through town, flushing the waste 50 yards beyond the final intake. Rock reservoirs, capped springs, and 3 shutoffs to keep the toxins out of our lungs. Werner's cabin sat on the perimeter, being swallowed by overgrown brush. Under the decaying steps sat an outbuilding packed with weathered equipment. He was out front carving a timber, his back bent like a rusted sickle. He did not even flinch. Werner, Kurt called out. I could catch your scent from the ridge. The vet grunted. His knife stayed steady. What is the kid's crazy idea this time? I threw the schematic down. The carving ceased. He examined my drawings like they were a ticket out of purgatory. He raised the paper to the light, following the marks that would either be our salvation or our tombstone. That old-timer analyzed my technical drawings with the intensity of a forensic investigator. Trash, he grunted. I kept a stone face. Strike the northern crest, then drift down toward the valley floor, he growled, marking the trail. Let physics do the heavy lifting. See that 13-foot plunge past the gates? That is raw momentum clearing the pipes without needing a single engine. Depth, he muttered, 4 feet. He tossed the sheets. Fine for July, but the winter freeze goes much further down. Once it hits 36 inches, everything turns to ice. Come February, this whole city will be drowning in its own filth. Werner paused mid-motion, grabbing the maps. Where did a kid like you learn about frozen soil depths? I study, I shot back. A thick quiet filled the room. He flattened the draft, squaring it exactly against the notches of his beat-up work table. Using native rock? He questioned. I gave him a look. Work begins Monday, and I want 6 guys who actually have a brain. I will give you 8. He nodded shortly, wearing the weary expression of someone who lived his life in the mud. I am hitting the path this afternoon. Assuming the college kid here can keep up on a steep climb. Count on it, I replied. He reached for his wood shaver, and just like that, we were in business. Not a word of fluff, no talk of my father, and absolutely no sympathy for the sickness that almost ended me. Werner cared only for the numbers before diving in. That simple gesture meant more than any crowd's applause. I stumbled upon her while checking the huge storage tower on the eastern side. I was verifying the cold weather stock and tallying every single heavy cloth bag. I was matching the boss's tall tales against the bare floor when a voice drifted from the dark. Sitting high on a box, she was tagging the beams. Maybe 19 years old, brunette, with soot staining her cheeks. She did not look up, chanting figures under her breath like a strange, rhythmic incantation. 43 units of rye, she murmured. We are short 4. The owner is stealing. She leaped down, her eyes piercing mine. I snatched her tablet, perfect tables, tracking seed types, mass, and the precise spot for every barrel. It was the smoking gun. You are the real operator in this place, I remarked. Honesty is a solitary path, she countered. Cold as stone, she said, he composes fairy tales. I merely track the physical reality of this warehouse. How long? 8 months now. Ever since my dad's funeral. She propped her notes against a drum. My father managed the accounts. When he passed, the truth vanished. I took over because no one else cared. What for? You are doing this for free. Do you not inspect the dams before the storm arrives? She challenged. Choosing not to see is a fatal mistake. I watched her closely. I need a data expert to audit this entire territory. Not just this barn. Every cow, every box, every penny. I need the hard, unvarnished facts. The supervisor is going to fight you. His approval is irrelevant. She tightened her grip on the chalk, wavering. What is my percentage? 5% of everything we claw back. Untraceable cash. All yours. A sharp, calculating spark flickered deep in her gaze. This was not joy. It was a shark looking for the hook. Which specific total are we talking about for that 5%? The net gains. If we recover 200 today and 400 tomorrow, you walk away with 30. If we get stuck, you are on your own. If this goes south, being penniless will be your lucky day. She calculated the risk in a heartbeat. I want access to every hidden record you have got, she demanded. Private documents, tax filings, even store tabs. I need to track every cent that leaked away. Deal. But we confront the manager as a team. I am not interested in some half-baked scheme. Before dusk, I promised, once the official signs off on us. She gave a quick, quiet acknowledgement. She returned to her task, chalk tapping. Don't forget, it is 40, 3 sacks, not 40, 7, she shouted. Do not risk your neck for phantom wealth. I will take care of the documentation, I swore. Way ahead of you. She gestured to her slate and walked off. Check it out. Complete. I took a look. Her work was impeccable. I took off. Inside 10 days, the reviewer had torn apart 3 of my blueprints. He shifted the conduit westward to avoid a stone ledge that would have been a death trap for the laborers. The primary reservoir required heavy reinforcement to withstand the brutal spring floods. He identified a rupture that would have drowned the entire basin. The guy was a lifesaver. I burned the old drafts. At daybreak, Werner had 8 tough-as-nails guys prepped to break through the icy ground. Spite and unpaid debt were my only fuel. 40 gold coins sat idle while the locals suffered for 2 months just to keep their heads above water. I only required basic iron, wood, and earth. 15 pieces bought the gear from the next county over. 25 stayed in my pocket. I was walking a razor, 1 slip, and I was a dead man. We clawed through the ground like desperate vultures in a graveyard. The underfelled soil was forgiving, practically yielding to every spade, letting the crew carve out the initial yard effortlessly. 7 days later, the main artery was ready. The men were already hauling massive boulders for the lining, building something that felt more like a fortress than a drainage pipe. A second squad had been hammering iron against stone since Monday, their steady, rhythmic clanging setting the pace for our frantic race against time. Marta hovered nearby like a silent specter, stalking the ledgers with surgical precision. She monitored every worker, every stone, and every cent draining from our coffers. She delivered the updates at midnight. 14 days in, the first leg stood complete, the masonry locked, the ditch dug, and the well fortified like a war room. The moment of judgment arrived when we opened the valves. Every soul in town gathered, standing in a heavy silence that tasted like a funeral. No one cheered. They wore that hollow gaze of the broken, convinced that every prayer eventually rots in the mud. 2 elderly women waited by the road, motionless as frozen wood. They watched that icy, violent flow for an hour before a whisper finally broke. It smells like nothing. One wheezed. Keep it that way, Warner snapped. as long as the flow never breaks. They simply turned and faded away like smoke. Don't expect any gratitude here. By the third week, my true nightmare manifested as a man named Hans Brauer. Hans's land sat right at the heart of the project, where his wife's crops hugged the south wall like sacred relics. He had vegetables fighting for every scrap of light. My designs dictated that the drainage had to plow directly through the center of his garden. 18 feet of produce blocked our progress. Hans met the dawn there, his silhouette looming dark and long against the rising sun. "Stop," he growled. He was a titan of a man, built like a tank, gripping a shovel until his hands turned ghostly white. "Not on my watch. You won't destroy our livelihood." Warner eyed me, just waiting for the word to physically remove him. I weighed the odds. To the west lay a subterranean field of rock, hitting that would shatter our tools and stall the project indefinitely. A left turn meant battling 10 feet of solid granite, but pushing forward meant ruining a man's world and fighting the land itself. That detour added 12 feet and an incline, potentially stalling the gravity-fed flow that kept the entire system functioning. The straight path was their only hope. "Hans," I muttered, my tone cold and sharp. "Tell me, did the plague claim your children last year?" He said nothing. "I'm not the enemy. I'm here because every family in this valley dug a grave last season. Without exception, your drinking water and your filth are only 24 feet apart. The earth is a wick, Hans, drawing in every ounce of poison you dump." He looked from the well to the waist, and I watched his white-knuckled grip on that spade finally begin to falter. "When we're done," I swore, "that well will be untainted, truly clean. Your kids have a right to a fighting chance at life." A heavy weight settled over the site. "My wife worked so hard on those onions," he whispered. "I'm aware," I said. I turned to the lead. "Pivot left. We'll add the extra 12 feet but dig the basin 1 foot deeper to maintain the draw." "Possible?" Warner calculated for 3 agonizing seconds. "The math is razor thin, but we can pull it off. The garden stays, Hans. We're diverting. It kills my timeline, but I'll pay for the peace." Hans observed the new markers, then vanished inside. "Just do it," he muttered. 36 hours later, we successfully navigated around his tiny patch of paradise. 42 days of agony, sweat, and grime later, the beast was underground. The network was finally breathing. 3 towns, 4 kilometers of masonry conduit, and 2 basins designed to inhale the decay. Everything concealed, everything secure. Marta had already posted the upkeep schedules on the wall before I could even collapse into a chair. The final tally: 15 gold spent on hardware, 0 on manpower. We still held 25 gold in our lockbox. Late August arrived with the final judgment. Marta dropped the quarterly review on my desk with the force of a gavel. 2 sheets of harsh reality. At the bottom, a red circle. Total valley casualties this summer peaked at 4. Last year saw 11 graves. The year prior, 9. "The evidence is right there," she said, her tone dry as bone. "I've read the data," I replied. "But you missed the shadows," she hissed. 4 of those losses last year were infants, tiny boxes. Now, a single youth lost, and not to the well. The rest were just natural ends. The fever didn't touch a soul. I focused on that red circle. "Track this every 3 months. This isn't bookkeeping. It's our political armor." She nodded, writing it down. "Actually," she noted, turning the ledger, "Barenfeld passed through during your absence. He paused in the center of town." "So?" I prodded. "He just laughed," she answered, her expression a complete blank. He wondered if the young master was blowing his inheritance on luxury plumbing for peasants. Then he galloped away, amused. "Did Liesel respond?" "She claimed you were healing and offered polite thanks for his visit." I stared toward the horizon. Barenfeld's estate is 12 kilometers south. His fields are rotting, his laborers are vanishing, and his debts are crushing him. Let him mock us. The darkness is already at his door. Clock his collapse, I barked. He's already a ghost. Elena remained stony. Miller is going to explode, I growled, once that invoice hits his desk. She ticked the ledger. I was drowning under 3 separate disasters. New faces, same crushing weight. Elena handled the accounting. Triple entry books, balanced every nightfall without fail. Miller prowled the site, whining until I pointed out I was pulling double his shifts. Empires start here, I whispered, sliding the forgeries over before vanishing into the dark. Clearing out the rot required 4 days of backbreaking labor. That minor hairline fracture turned out to be 3 massive structural splits, buried beneath 2 years of filth and crippling debt that Miller's boys attacked out of spite. They reached the 4-day cutoff. The corrosion won. But inside, the iron was flawless. The previous site manager bailed halfway through the project, leaving the hardest part gutting the primary chassis mostly done. Miller spent 20 minutes testing the walls. We have 6 months of liquidity, he noted, provided we don't get reckless. We won't, I swore. My team consisted of 8 men working off federal back taxes. 3 days a week digging through sludge for a 50% break on their debt. Elena's math proved this slashed payroll more than the scrap's value by keeping work moving. We offered a lifeline to the desperate. Her logic, my gamble, the numbers held up. Our first shipment of heavy iron emerged by day 6. Miller picked through it like a wolf, pulling the thickest beams aside. Mainframe inventory. Exactly. Kurt had been tailing me for 3 days, looking completely betrayed. He finally cracked when he realized where the first heavy transport was heading. You're burying gold in the marsh, he spat. Not burying it, Kurt. Reinforcing it. Packed foundation, twin drains, heavy curbing. It looks like mud, but the spine is steel. That is the primary vein. 2.8 kilometers long. 2.8, too many. Kid. His gaze went cold. Iron roads are for royalty. The rest of us just sink. Always have. I turned. Kurt, how many investors showed last October? He stopped. Maybe 12 before the rains. And afterward? Silence. 2, maybe 3. Because the swamp eats cash. A guy who loses a truck never shows in November. He tells everyone this place is a tomb. I stared down the trail. A partner who stays dry brings his wallet back. And he talks. 2. The steel was a gift. The labor was a write-off. This road funds itself. Kurt went silent. We functioned like a piston. Double shifts. Miller handled the metal prep. This kid Leo, a natural at balancing loads, steered the paving team. 3 weeks later, we had 2.8 kilometers of iron-reinforced path and custom runoff. We crushed it down with a 10-ton steamroller. It wasn't a luxury drive, but it was solid, the kind a semi could floor without sinking. The first fleet after the autumn rains pulled up to the main gate. The driver sat high in his cab, gawking at the miles of dry pavement, then at me. What happened to this pit? He asked. We paved over the nightmare. He blinked. No snapped axles? 0. He nodded slowly. I'll spread the word. Elena marked the victory. She tallied the price of my fixations. The river surged between 2 concrete ghosts. Miller and I stood in the muck one morning, eyeing the void. We surveyed the old pylons, the churning rapids, and my suicidal blueprints. It was a 31-meter gap. Not impossible, but larger than anything Miller had ever tackled. His pride had evaporated. I've built 12, he muttered. This has to clear it in one shot. This water chews through iron and snaps piers like twigs. We need a curved span. I screamed my orders. Single arch, bolted to bedrock, not silt. Dig deep. Blueprints verified. Perfect. Werner stared at the roaring, violent whitewater. Death's doorway. Logic prevails. Thick beams, massive boulders, and precision spacers. Calculus is king. Prove it. I'm grinding, I snapped. Every damn midnight. Werner gave a cold chuckle. Obsession. Actually, it is my truth. Crouching, he felt the icy granite. Solid. This rock won't move. 0 errors. The foundation's pure. We're spinning silk over the abyss. Total insanity, he whispered. Timber reaching for heaven. 40-meter falls. Exactly. The risk. 1 crack and we're dead. A shared casket. No room for mistakes. Right. He rose, scanning the distant tree line. 2 weeks for the figures, he grumbled. Okay, Begin. Those schematics actually required 21 full days. Werner pulverized the prototypes with thick masonry blocks, restored and corrected. Suddenly, legal papers hit my workspace. Official messenger arrived, sealed threats and icy warnings, total blackmail. The far shore, stated the paper, is strictly off limits, opposing that politician's decree shattered an ancient treaty. He faked documents to erase my legacy. I scoured my old man's cellar safes. 3 decaying crates, 60 years of grime. Marta assisted the search. She sifted through trash as I sought a legal escape. Inside bin 3, tucked away, sat the 1247 highway code. I read the small print. Personal crossings on contested soil. Paid for by one person. Stay private property until every penny is returned. High court mandate. Unbreakable. Final. No matter who owns dirt. See, Marta smirked. He missed it. His legal team failed. Submit this before completion. She threw it. Hurry. A messenger bolted toward the city carrying wealth and proof. 3 gold spent. Failure was pricier. The predator arrived later. $5,000 suit hid a shocked predator. He strutted with the arrogance of a professional destroyer. Marta intercepted him. He waved his injunction like a weapon. She offered the 1247 statute. His face went pale. This is archaic, he growled. It's valid, she countered. Game over. She glared. Going? He bolted, leaving his drink behind. She located me afterward, sporting a quiet, deadly grin. Trapped, she exhaled. He realizes defeat. Excellent. I wanted blood. Money started pouring in by Monday. 3 gold for boats, 1 for wagons. Commuters swamped us. First month, 28 gold. Next, 31. Marta totaled it. Secure. Security was vital. However, the eastern acreage was perishing. 20 hectares of rich earth shriveled. Soil turned to dust. Storms taunted us, while the dry spell devoured our spirits. Life out here is a sucker's bet where the house always wins. We spent months begging the dust for mercy while the river laughed at us from 1,300 feet away. The land tilted exactly 10 feet toward the dawn. It was a freak geographic quirk, a natural slope that practically begged gravity to do the killing for us. The location was perfectly primed for either a holy miracle or a total, soul-crushing disaster. Werner and I paced the border on a gray, miserable Tuesday morning. He gripped that level like a sacred relic. Every 65 feet, we drove stakes and prayed our math was flawless. The main flow hugs the south edge, I noted. 3 veins split north, each choked by a heavy wooden gate. Open when dry, halfway in storms, shut for the freeze, Werner grunted. I have built dozens of these rigs. Easy enough, sure, which is why you are sweating while I just watch. He almost grinned. That was his second near smile in 42 days I was keeping count. What about the walls? He asked. Stone or mud? Pack dirt for the main trunk. It is low pressure and wide, much easier to fix when the earth starts moving. But use heavy masonry for the side pipes where the current really picks up speed. We cannot afford a blowout in 100-degree July. Right. He scribbled a note. 6-week job. 5 if we get help. 5.5, he snapped. Only rookies use straight lines. These need a curve. 5.5 it is, I said. Trouble blew in from the west by the second week. Baron Klein held the deed to everything 2 miles past that ridge. His land was high and scorched. His hired hands were even hungrier for a win than my own crew. He was lurking in the shadows, tracking our every move through a rat on my payroll. Marta caught the spy twice. Finally, Klein sent 3 thugs to shut us down for good. They arrived early Wednesday, blocking the entrance. Dead silent, standing there like 3 grim reapers. Massive men, carrying weapons but keeping them tucked away. They showed their empty hands just to play head games with me. Those guys were begging for a reason to draw. My laborers stopped dead and waited for my signal. I locked eyes with the trio for 1 long, brutal minute. Then I called for Marta. She showed up 21 minutes later, fully in on the play. Her gaze never left her ledger. How much for a line to Klein's Hill? I whispered. She scanned the landscape and her numbers. A branch line, 2,000 feet long. 1 extra valve. Add 3 weeks to the clock. What is that water worth to him? Right now, his farm is just a pile of expensive dust. If we deliver, he clears 70 or 80 gold a year. Good. I walked toward Klein's muscle. Tell your boss I have a deal he cannot refuse. They paused. Not the morning they expected. We sent the message that night. 2 days later, Klein's dog showed up. The boss stayed in his mansion. We met in the hall with Marta, letting her records set the terms of the meeting. I explained the plan, a direct connection to those bone-dry western fields of his. 1 pipe and 1 tap, bleeding off our tank. He gets the exact same flow we get. The cost? 200 gold up front plus 10 years of taxes. His lawyer called it straight robbery. I told him the clock was running. 1 week. After that, we plug the feed, and any new contract starts at the riverbank for a massive premium. He crawled back 3 days later. Klein offered 120 gold. I took it. Marta pulled me aside. You would have taken 100. True, but he paid 120 because he was scared. I watched the wet ink on the paper, feeling the weight of what we had just done. 120 gold for 21 days and a valve. Costs? 11 gold, she whispered. So that is 109 gold in pure profit? Yes. She wrote it in. Trading dirt and rock for a fortune. Circle that number. I ordered. I never want to forget how easy it is to tax basic human survival. Klein's thugs vanished the second the gold cleared. No regrets. No thanks. Just a transaction. The whole project, paid for by the neighbor's own greed, finished in exactly 42 days. The final test came on a dead, hot Thursday in late August. Werner turned the main wheel. The water exploded, split at the junction, and bled into the dirt like a wound. Every man stood on the edge of ruin, mesmerized as their lifeline finally cut through the killing heat. 3 decades I spent loathing every inch of this sun-baked hellhole. Falling to the dirt, I sensed a faint, icy pulse deep below. The technician cut the power at 20 minutes, leaving a deafening void. He swiped his tablet, swearing he would be back in precisely 7 days. Moment of truth. I rose, eyes fixed on the jagged industrial wounds. 30 years, I choked out. Not a single lick of moisture until today. We struck oil, but getting rich was going to be a long game. Figures changed, prompting me to push the ledgers over to him. 30 monthly payments, plus 90 every year just for the plumbing. The noose tightened. Those sharks had already measured us for coffins. Absolute robbery, 800 gold per year for 5 consecutive winters. Marta tore through the legalese with the cold focus of a doctor. This is sheer malice, she spat. He is waiting for us to fold. My signature doomed us, betting our lives on a 5-year long shot. Fresh hell, a cemetery city. Faucets hissed, yet the sidewalks stayed empty. Life finally sprouted from the mud as the turnstiles began to spin. The quiet was suffocating. I desperately required laborers for the quarry. Every structure, the massive flour mill, the towering grain bins, plus the shops offered zero value without workers to keep things moving. 80 citizens was a joke. I needed a massive wave of migrants. The strategy shifted. Give them an open door, not an ultimatum. Blumenthal Heights, dirt, cheap leases, and free classes for every neighborhood child. Endless water and free transport for the first 100 households. Locked prices for life. Zero fine print. Pack up the kids. Get moving. We blasted that tempting offer to every neighboring hamlet. With literacy rates low, Marta paid town criers to bellow the update. The big shots mocked me for handing out the crown jewels. My competitor questioned if I had finally gone completely insane. Eisenstadt kept quiet, smelling the rain before the clouds appeared. The downtrodden felt cautious, scarred by a lifetime of broken promises. Their only concern was whether the tap water was truly safe. Is this some hustle? What if the drought never breaks? Marta soothed the masses while I locked down the shipping lanes. These deals are bulletproof. Even during a famine, you will eat. 21 days in, a thick cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. Tobias showed up with a wagon full of kids and empty pockets. Refugees of the market crash, Marta walked out to welcome them. She displayed the granite masonry, the gushing pipes, and the titles. Tobias scanned the document, then caught his wife's panicked expression. Set prices? He murmured. Marta promised the costs were frozen solid. Ink met paper. Within 4 weeks, 11 more trucks arrived. 60 days passed, 31 households settled. News traveled like wildfire. It was the main topic in every dive, bar, and chapel. Then the bomb dropped. 7 groups from my enemy's territory. They rolled in on Tuesday, eager for a fresh beginning. The stench of a setup hit me the moment I crossed the threshold. Klein's operation was a human meat grinder, shredding lives for spare change. These souls had either torched their futures or were outrunning the law. I shadowed Tobias, the heavy tasked with breaking the fresh meat. He dropped the hammer. 3 out of 7 families were drowning in Klein's interest. Small-time back rent peanuts, but the kind of debt that buries you alive. 62 gold coins total. I wiped the ledger clean right then. It gutted my quarterly margins, but I was buying more than time. Loyalty was the real play. Every cent spent bought me an army. Cash was secondary to proving my word was carved in granite. 4 days later, Klein rolled up looking like a walking obituary. 6 hired guns flanked him, his face a twisted mask of pure malice. Looming from his saddle, he barked, "You're poaching my damn payroll." "Their paperwork is finalized," I said. He spat, "3 are still mine." "Wrong," I countered. "They're square. Read the receipts if you're confused." His eyes turned to ice. "You bought them. I freed them. Big difference." I flashed the deeds Marta drafted 48 hours ago, waiting for the snap. Clause 1231 of the Imperial Settlement Act. A laborer's contract dissolves once a third party settles the balance. I offered the documents. "You want these now or via courier?" Klein ground his teeth so hard I thought they'd shatter. "This is an ambush," he hissed. "I paid retail. Deal with it." He scanned his muscle, then the workers, then glared a hole through me. "The irrigation," he snarled. "It stays open. Your crops won't starve. The timeline stands. Our previous contract remains set in stone." I stashed the paperwork. "Unless you're looking for a funeral." He blinked. He stared at me like a live wire before wheeling his horse around. Marta appeared at my shoulder once the dust finally settled. "He'll poison the wells," she warned. "Give him 1 week," I replied. "He'll lash out now. Then we'll drain his liquid assets until he begs." She watched the horizon where Klein's thugs had disappeared. "If his ego doesn't bankrupt him first. He's just a bully, Marta." I turned back. Log the transition. Document his lack of legal standing. Her pen was a blur. Marta was the real engine of this firm. She tracked me down Friday with that problem-solved expression. "There's a regular at the local pub," she noted. 3-week stay. He's tutoring the owner's kids just for a bed and breakfast. Teaching what, exactly? Literacy and calculus. All day long. The waitress told Elsa he was a top-tier Salzhofen academic. What broke him? The bottle. I capped my pen. "Bring him in." He arrived Saturday, clean but shaking like a man on death row. August Kellner. 43 years of a life gone to hell. The whiskey had hollowed him. His hands weren't built for a shovel. He sat without being asked, which showed a spark of old pride. "Marta says you're a scholar," I noted. "I teach. It's all I have." His threat stung like a cold blade at my windpipe. "Stop treating those kids like filth if you want results." "What's your body count?" 4 here, 60 back home." "Then why'd you bolt like a coward?" He stared at the scratched wood. "The elites just wanted a lapdog who'd play nice for their photo ops." "Too much to ask?" Silence filled the room. "No." I leaned in. "Listen close. I'm only saying this once. 10 years in and I'm still scouring the gutters for killers and accountants just to stay afloat. I'm building an empire from nothing. These street rats are the only raw material I've got left. You're the big dreamer." He looked up, playing the role of headmaster for these rejects now. "I'm forging wolves. This place is just the assembly line. That's stone cold. That's reality. When your stomach's empty, a cold heart is the only thing that keeps you breathing." He let the silence hang. "I came from 40 children. What kind of nightmare did I walk into? 2 rotting shacks and 112 runaways, more dumping monthly, from babies to teens. Not a single book or supply. It's a cemetery. he croaked. A total disaster. Not even close. It's a fresh start. No baggage to cut out. We build this right from the very first brick. He looked at his trembling hands, hunting for an exit that didn't exist. Outside, starving boys were stalking a bird for dinner. "I'll need a bunk," he mumbled. "Room, board, and 1 gold coin monthly." "Up front," he gasped. "That's a fortune. Top dollar for top talent. I need the elite." I stared him down. "Hide the booze. 1 smell of whiskey, and you're gone. Clear?" I let that threat hang in the air. His chance to bail evaporated. "See you Monday," he rasped. "Marta will show you the ropes." He rose, nodding like a man heading to the gallows, and vanished into the night. Marta emerged from the dark. "Is he it? Maybe. Watch his drinking for 30 days. Don't step in unless he starts sinking." "Got it," she said, checking the files. 160 families later, the money dried up. Marta smelled the disaster coming. "Starvation," she hissed, closing the books. Those figures sounded like a coffin being nailed shut. "We're hitting 60% of our food goals. By July, we'll likely drop to 40%. I looked at the math. 310 hungry mouths. This dirt wasn't going to feed anyone. We were burning cash just for bread. What land is left on the deed? The South Marsh and the lower fields. I felt a tiny spark of hope. Switch to birds. Chickens and geese. They grow fast, and eggs will keep us alive. Put cows in the marsh. The water's toxic. Werner needs 4 weeks to clean it. Tell him he has 2 weeks. I did the math. What's the total damage to make this happen? She was dead serious. 300 gold to buy enough livestock to survive. I want breeders, not meat. We're buying a future, not just 1 meal. We've only got 140. Then call the shark. Dietrich is the only way out. Dietrich was the only runner brave enough to hit the deadly mountain trails. A bottom feeder who'd been circling us, just waiting for the first sign of weakness. He lived for the moment we'd finally bleed out in the dark. He was a predator waiting for a crack. I sent a messenger before dark. 2 days later, he was grinning at me, knowing he held all the cards. 300 gold for the livestock, I said, cutting to the chase. Birds, cattle, and pigs. You get 40% of the cut for 18 months. Then we buy you out at market value. A clean exit with a massive profit. He adjusted his jacket. 40%? For 18 months on a 300 gold risk? I need 750 on the back end to even care. You'll walk with 900, easy. Marta nodded. The deal was signed. We saved the ranch, but we just sold our souls to the devil. She shoved the ledger across the timber in silence. He devoured the figures. 35 points. He breathed. 18-month term. I didn't flinch. She gave a cold, mechanical nod. We wagered 35 was his breaking point. 35% over a year and a half. I echoed. Plus, you get the first shot at any surplus at the street rate once we are even. That was the lure. He looked up, his gaze heavy with naked greed. Priority on the excess. He grunted. You secure the supply. We get the capital. It keeps the peace and the silence. He stalled just long enough to prove ego mattered more than the money. Done, he barked. For 3 weeks, a dusty caravan of groaning timber carts delivered the livestock in waves. 40 hens, 12 geese, 6 steers, 8 hogs, and 200 trout for the pond. Marta put the recruits on the birds. They were green but understood industrial agriculture. A veteran named Peter managed the cattle. 6 months later, we were not just surviving, we were winning. By month 8, we were overflowing with stock. Every scrap went to Dietrich, exactly as promised. Marta tallied the take, 940 gold from his 300 gold seed. He came to collect. He glared at the check. A 328% gain, he whispered. 18 months, I noted. Unbelievable. He stared at me like I was a ghost. What is the next play? I have a few leads cooking, I said. I will call for a silent partner. He drank and left. Marta watched him go. He will return. Bank on it, I replied. Hunger never stays satisfied. The floor fell out on a Tuesday, one of those bleak, hollow mornings where life just feels thin. Werner burst in at dusk, caked in filth and clutching a jagged stone like a trophy. He dropped the ore onto my desk and just stood there, panting in the silence. It was a fist-sized lump of quartz, but under the lantern, gold veins bled through the rock. I studied the sample. Where? The North Ridge? He gasped. A fresh split. He collapsed, shaking. Werner never sat. It runs deep into the mountain, he said. No telling the total depth. 8 centimeters wide. More if we really dig. He paused. No jackpot, but it is steady. The vein was thick. I turned the rock. Honestly, the quality was bottom shelf at best. This was no lottery win. Not the kind of strike that makes a man rich instantly. This was a grind. Pulling value meant heavy machinery, broken backs, and years of sweat. I know the exact rig we need, I said. Werner looked doubtful. Show me. I began sketching. A massive water wheel driving heavy iron pistons to crush the raw stone into fine powder. Then we washed that dust over plates, letting gravity pull the gold out for us. I drew as I spoke. Werner understood blueprints better than talk. He studied it for 3 minutes. The wheel is basic, he grunted. Simple build. But the hammers must be solid iron. Cast iron, no mercy. We need weight. Bran can handle the forge. Keep him focused. The wood will take a beating. It will rattle apart without heavy bracing. That is the trap. Support struts here, Werner said, pointing. And the joints must be swappable. They will fail first. I checked his edits. He was right. How long until we are humming? 6 weeks for the frame. 2 more to time the hits so the vibration is offset. If they hit together, the foundation snaps in a month. 8 weeks, then. With luck, we had none. We knew the risks. Building that beast drained 200 gold pieces from our bank. Using Dietrich's iron and our timber, Werner's crew worked for 10 weeks, 2 weeks late. It sputtered to life in late spring, coughing while Werner dialed in the percussion. Finally, it found its rhythm. Marta logged 60 gold in monthly profit. A start, nothing more. It was a cold, heartless machine, printing money from water while we slept. Marta closed the book. This clears the debt, she said. It does, and it carves a new road ahead. I looked at the map. We can finally head for the coast. Then the sky fell. The state order arrived on a Friday, smelling like a perfectly baited, lethal trap. Silk-suited predators were burying me under a landslide of legal threats. Those scavengers exploited ancient building codes to hijack my entire excavation site. That North Ridge was my lifeblood, and they were aiming for my throat. My land sat on a minor error my rival had tracked for years. I spent 40 minutes frantically tossing my father's crates, praying for a savior. Hidden inside a decaying steel box sat a deed from 2 centuries ago. The ink was undeniable. Our mineral rights were set for all eternity. That fragile page rendered their million-dollar lawsuits into piles of useless trash. Our title began in 1189. Their modern laws were merely loud children. Armed with a 145-year head start, I dispatched Marta to finish it. They turned ghostly pale when she unleashed that truth on their expensive lawyers. For 10 minutes, she watched them tear into one another like starving dogs. Their lead counsel begged for a recess, but I smelled a pathetic bluff. We owned the clock. 200 years of history weren't going to move. That jerk actually smirked when a lone girl arrived without a legal team. Unfazed, she noted that a signature's weight isn't determined by who holds it. I instructed her to record every ounce of his ego for the files. She had the time, date, and his slurs noted before his laughter died. Hauling brought us 30 gold monthly, but we had finally hit a wall. Backroads are a death trap. The real wealth lies on the open sea. One ship outworks 50 trucks, and the shoreline was only 12 kilometers away. Reinhardt wasn't family, but he wasn't interested in filling more body bags. He manipulated every player from the center while remaining the top dog. The harbor was his domain, and he shared a shady pact with my nemesis. My foe was just a tenant, but I proposed a full empire alliance. His humble workspace proved he didn't need flashy gold to project real danger. The 50-something-year-old had eyes that could spot a hustle from miles away. He stripped away the fluff and got to the point, which I admired. He already knew my business and those 9 heavy cannons I'd acquired. Ending the small talk, he asked exactly who those guns were targeting. I demanded a permanent, unbreakable contract for total access to his shipping docks. The man had calculated his percentage before I even sat in the chair. His opening move was a demand for 15% of total revenue. I countered with 10% and a 20 gold monthly minimum payment. That guaranteed paycheck hooked him, protecting his funds during the lean seasons. We inked the contract in 20 minutes, the cleanest win of my life. The air turned icy as he leaned forward to offer a warning. My rival was recruiting 3 major players to erase me from the map. They were preparing for all-out war simply because I'd wounded his pride. I had humiliated him 3 times over 2 years. The man finally broke. Reinhardt talked because my bankruptcy would kill his guaranteed monthly income stream. He asked if I heard the thunder. I told him I was the storm. The carnage begins this spring when the ground can finally support the armor. I returned home to wake my ghosts. A massacre was officially scheduled. She was ready, charting the total ruin of our enemies across the table. 21 days ago, the harbor boss flagged a delivery that chilled me. Logbooks hit my desk hard as she highlighted massive bulk food orders. Nobody stocks that much pantry weight unless they're planning a massacre. Paperwork suggested an invasion force totaling 800 hostile boots. She kept the file hidden until the evidence became impossible to ignore. "Give it to me straight," I growled, despite her obvious fear of me. 42 days into the peace deal, a lone vessel entered the harbor. It carried wheat and textbooks, a perfect mask for the illicit cargo. 3 hidden gold chests sat below, waiting for the highest bidder. Cooking those books was a death sentence, and she fully understood that. I greenlit the play, but she really masterminded the whole operation. Once docked, she tallied 40 gold coins in pure, untaxed profit. She masked the payoff inside manufacturing logs and local harbor duties. Our monthly take added up to exactly 130 gold. I scribbled that figure right over a far more lethal equation. 800 mercenaries would hit our wire once the frost thawed. We were pitting 200 experts against 300 green rookies. The payout felt great, but our timer was already running out. I questioned what 8 heavy cannons would run us on the market. That caught her off guard. Usually, she's thinking 3 moves ahead. "I'll find the quote by tonight," she replied, wheels already turning. By October, her web of informants was leaking every enemy move. What started as a trade tip became a sophisticated intelligence network. Maids and file clerks funneled every rival secret straight to us. Heisted memos revealed a corrupt pact among 4 elite bloodlines. They framed it as security, but it was just old-fashioned greed. "Tradition," I muttered, knowing they only wanted their property back. I stashed the note and confirmed the March strike remained scheduled. Winter sludge would stall the advance until March, our thin window. Recovered blueprints detailed a 90-day offensive to burn us down. 5 months won't build an army, but it's enough for an ambush. Those youngsters weren't combatants, but they were sharper than blades. Those kids crunched ballistics better than any grizzled artillery sergeant. They drifted like smoke, snatching secrets while playing the innocent part. The moles provided the maps, but the tactical details stayed blurry. Spies count the trucks, but they rarely hear the general's whispers. I required a different ghost, which brought me to August's door. He clutched his cup like a sword, protecting his young pupils. "They're just babies," he pleaded, shielding them from the coming storm. I needed observers who could eyeball artillery without being detected. His class possessed a mental precision that soldiers simply lacked. He finally looked up once I promised to protect their lives. "If we fail," I warned, "your school becomes their first target." He eventually asked for the head count. I requested 6 boys. I selected 6 students for 3 deadly scouting runs. Playing Doc Rat let us eyeball every gun they had. 14 days later, a snitch confirmed they wanted us dead. 800 hostiles are coming, 500 pros, the rest kids. Eisenstadt led them, commanding 400 hungry, desperate wolves. Klein settled up, giving us 150 shooters to fight. We stole their playbook because some drunks talk too much. They'll squeeze us from 3 sides, hoping we'll just run. Dealing with Reinhardt was their mistake. Marta mapped their funeral. Black ink on paper showed exactly where they'd hit us. She tracked their tanks. They aren't fighting, they're erasing us. Plans fail when people die. Tell Werner, watch that ridge. Werner waited 5 minutes before pointing to a sharp turn. Here, he said. They die here. We just dug their grave. Werner didn't hate walls. He just lacked men to hold them. We're spread thin. A wall is just a hurdle for them. Violence is coming. Our job is more than guarding a gate. I'm choking the road, making every inch cost them blood. He looked at the roads. Meat grinders in the mud. He grunted. Skip walls. We need 3 hidden nests to rain fire. Dig a trench out east. They can drown or get shot. If they stay on the road, they're just target practice. In the mud, they're slow and open. Werner just nodded. East is the key. Tell them, keep digging, don't stop. This must hold. Give me 42 days, then 30 more. I need every stone. Fine. The hammers start at dawn. We worked like men building their own final resting places. Building that east fort was a soul-crushing, brutal nightmare. 10 feet of stone and a hidden sniper nest inside. A ditch and a bunker, watching 400 meters of death. That west lookout let a few guys stop 2 roads. Werner cut the north hideout directly into the cliffside. He looked at the frame with a rare, quiet pride. It was cold and useful. Every stone had a purpose. This would have changed history, he sighed. Ready for more? I'm building this so I can finally walk away forever. Marta's notes mentioned a foul smell coming from the pipes. She thought it was just bad air for the workers. She missed the point, but I knew that stink's value. At dawn, I studied the slime on the stagnant rocks. Dirty amber crystals. Crude, unstable, but it was enough. We took carbon from the kilns Werner kept burning. Getting blasting salts was hard. I hid them down south. 2 quiet men ran the high-risk site for me. We turned burnt wood daily to finish the chemical brew. Keep it dry. The white powder arrives in 6 months. I had 4 months until bankruptcy. I bore the burden alone until the first freeze hit. Inside his tiny workshop, shadows flickered while the gale battered the wooden exterior. We sat in heavy silence for 20 minutes, staring at the deadly silhouette of my design. It resembled a simple pipe, but the craftsman sensed the raw power hidden within. He whispered that his hands forged bells, yet this device demanded a wicked precision. A 2mm error, I barked, means we all end up in a grave. One microscopic flaw was an execution order. He vowed to achieve the required accuracy. Specialized tools were necessary, so I produced the classified blueprints from my jacket. He analyzed structural tension while our narrow chance at life evaporated with the frost. February brought our doom. That was when he finally questioned the total quantity. 8, I answered. He looked haunted, creating 8 such monsters in 90 days. My gaze stayed fixed. He exhaled a shaky breath and realized we needed specialists immediately. Recruit the city's top talent, I commanded. He gave a vacant, hollow nod. A single worry chilled me whether my secret propellant possessed enough force to strike. The mixture was concentrated violence. The gamble was whether his bronze would hold. He closed the ledgers and tied our shared destiny with a leather cord. February is the date, he pledged. Back home, our shop survived on 60 gold coins. We were hemorrhaging money. Every single cent was funneled into this final, frantic defense. Raw ore cost 180 gold, inflated by the extortionate harbor fees. Fuel and timber consumed another 40. Essentially, he was laboring for his own survival. 220 gold had vanished. We had 35 pieces left with no backup. One bad harvest would ruin us. Those 35 coins were our only safety net. That dread robbed me of sleep until mid-February, when the first mold stopped glowing. 5 men hauled the beast into the drifts while the wind howled. The barrel rested on crude timber because we lacked a proper military carriage. I targeted a distant oak at 200 yards and took the torch myself. 80 grams of death filled the bore, followed by a solid iron sphere. My calculations were flawless. He approached with the flame, his hands pale from the chill. No roar followed, just the sound of reality tearing. The bronze casing burst. A horrific snapping rang out as the metal failed, pitching us into the mud. We survived, though a searing fragment of debris lodged itself in his arm. He removed the shrapnel silently, gazing at the ruins of his failed masterpiece. "I moved too fast," he gasped. "I shaved the walls thin to save time. Pressure inevitably finds the flaw." He stared at the wreckage and his blood-stained palms. He pleaded for 48 hours to try again. I checked our final 35 gold. Another attempt would cost 25. That would leave only 10 coins to survive on. "Make it happen," I ordered. 11 days later, a reinforced Titan emerged from the fire. He beefed up the breach and used a forged jacket to shield the fuse. He altered the tempering to prevent fractures, detailing every desperate modification he made. We returned to the ice that Tuesday, starting with a cautious 60-gram load. The projectile missed the mounting was the issue, not the integrity of the gun. He adjusted the sights. By the third firing, that old oak was mere kindling. He stood paralyzed, looking at the charred hole where a landmark once stood. Then reality struck. We still required 7 more before the lunar cycle ended. 10 gold pieces remain. One more mistake and the darkness consumes us all. "View your mishaps as overpriced schooling," he rasped, scouring the horizon before returning to his blueprints. 42 sunrises, 7 metallic hallucinations. Our muscle was a metalworker named Brandt. He possessed the frozen composure essential for this suicide run. Werner provided him the exhaustive briefing regarding every customized technical adjustment. After minor frame alterations, Werner's silent approval confirmed the man. We were fully prepared by mid-March. 8 weapons, 8 frames, and 400 rounds stashed within the arid granite basement. Quadruple months of toil yielded 240 gold coins. Only 20 remained. Losing equaled extinction. 14 days of combat would bankrupt us. Predictably, the nobleman's representative arrived in early March. Adorned in premium fabrics holding an official seal, his arrogance thrived on pure terror. I served him a beverage while his silent threat loomed like an uncocked pistol. That parchment ordered an instantaneous halt to all ongoing building operations. Their target was the massive cannons his informants had already leaked details regarding. He discussed total submission and toxic debt meant to ruin the whole community. Checking the tiny text, I creased the sheet and rose. "Walk with me. There is a sight to behold." We strolled toward the field. He walked with rigid self-importance, yet his grin began dissolving. The artillery waited near the forest edge, 8 metal tubes seeking an excuse to strike. Targeting a wooden barricade 250 yards distant, Werner gestured. One weapon thundered. That blast sounded like heaven crashing, a ripple that truly robbed the air from my chest. It struck like a heavy punch to the gut, rattling my bones and extinguishing every prayer. The braced hardwood barrier sustained a direct impact. I observed the wood crumble into splinters. The official recoiled, his bravado vanishing instantly. 7 identical companions remain, I murmured. 400 projectiles, 42 days of drills. He gawked at the smoke, then the remaining steel beasts. He babbled concerning the agreement. We reviewed it, refused. These fortifications meet every standard. These cannons are ours, cast from native minerals and personal labor. We are resolving our obligations precisely as the initial agreements dictated. I whispered nearby. Tell him our lookout has his bedroom perfectly targeted. He fled prior to noon, abandoning his drink. Hostilities commenced the next Thursday. Marta's scouting provided a 6-hour lead. A courier arrived at daybreak bearing a brief message. Visitors approaching. 4 groups. At daybreak, that 6-hour gap seemed infinite. Werner had arrived already. Ignoring his bandaged arm, he barked orders while adjusting lenses using his healthy hand. He had established the boundary lines since 12 a.m. He allowed me slumber. Current situation? I asked. Prepared. The 3rd group moved incredibly slowly. I motivated them until they hurried. He remained focused on the hilltop. Meadows are booby-trapped. George positioned 40 snipers upstairs. He nodded darkly. We lingered. They advanced down the path with predictable arrogance, neatly aligned, leading, messy trailing. 400 soldiers arrived. Mounted commanders. 7 horsemen indicated the high-ranking staff clustered within one target area. From 400 yards, they noticed us. The line stopped as the leaders began arguing. Atop the hill, Werner stayed still. "They are trying to circle us," he muttered. "Let them attempt it." Opposing forces divided with standard tactical accuracy. The majority retreated into thick brush, aiming to bypass us. They perceived themselves as geniuses. Flanking is simple arithmetic. Why strike a fortress when bypassing is an option? They overlooked our months studying every bit of soil. Our traps were remarkably straightforward. Homemade explosives with triggers, hidden precisely where they had to tread. We avoided a massacre. We simply intended to destroy their spirit for combat. Suits waltzed in with that slick, unearned confidence that only laundered millions can buy. I launched the opening sequence 3 digital strikes, 20 seconds apart, just to prove I wasn't playing. It was a head game, not a brawl, but those soft city lawyers folded like paper once I squeezed. Their top guy didn't even last 10 minutes before the pressure completely broke his spirit. 7 high-priced sharks stood paralyzed, watching their big careers evaporate into digital nothingness. 3 quit instantly, 2 snuck out, and the last pair walked straight into a media disaster. Their big plan didn't just fail, it vanished, leaving them holding absolutely nothing. Chaos erupted. The partners screamed at nothing while their assistants scrambled to save their own skins. Their billion-dollar deal burned down in 15 seconds, giving me the green light to finish them off. My sister caught her team's eye and gave the signal, tear them apart, but save the evidence. Dangerous files flooded their screens, turning their planned exit into a desperate, messy retreat. We had them pinned to the floor with 12 separate lawsuits in under 3 minutes. We hit 6 major weak spots, but the real killer was watching 400 investors pull their funding live. The bosses were stuck dodging cameras while their parked town cars became symbols of their absolute failure. It took 3 minutes to kill their legacy, and my wife looked at me with pure pride. She stayed by the window, tracking their messy exit like a predator eyeing a wounded animal. "Look at him run," she yelled. "The CEO is panicked. Is anyone even left on his side?" She glanced down. Maybe 150 hangers-on. The smart ones already left. I didn't even look. My attorney was ready to go for the throat, but I made him wait until things settled. By mid-morning, my brother confirmed 200 big lenders had backed out. We were safe. "Our rival is finished now." He gambled the whole company on one play and lost everything. I called in my 60-person team that I'd been keeping on standby since Tuesday morning. I sent the text "execute," and my crew hit them where it hurt while they were still dazed. The war was over. This was just the slow, painful process of watching them finally break. Those 60 pros took back the building, reclaiming the rooms where those suits once acted like gods. The board was terrified. Once they realized they were trapped, they stopped fighting and looked for a door. They were gone by noon, and we walked out of the mess without a single mark on us. My dad's strategy was perfect. He turned every move they made into a trap until they snapped. My wife checked the site, noting 30 feet of our fence had been wrecked by their heavy gear. The total, $40,000 and 6 weeks of pure hell that I'll never get back. A few local crews showed up with 150 guys, hoping to pick over the remains. They stopped at the top of the hill and looked down at the massive legal wall we'd built. My team kept hitting those dark corners where their CEO was still trying to hide. The leftovers of our brutal defense hung over the office like a thick, choking cloud of smoke. Then I launched the exact finishing move my father had taught me years ago. 7 fresh lawsuits were posted in the open, impossible for anyone on that hill to miss. They felt the weight of our victory and saw the evidence, so they finally gave up. At 1 p.m., the security chief gave me a nod. The threat was dead and the scavengers gone. 150 people faded into the distance, and I didn't do a thing to stop them. I let them go because a survivor who can tell the tale is far more terrifying than a ghost. The main road to the business district stayed completely empty for the rest of the morning. Not a single soul dared to cross our line after what they witnessed today. The lead manager stayed loyal. Turns out a real friend is worth way more than a fake payoff. I'll call him soon to plan our next move and thank him for the heads up in July. He showed up at 2 o'clock sharp with 150 workers ready to help us rebuild. Only the zealots remained, bracing for my final, desperate gambit. He paced the pavement, finally emerging from the shadows. They worked with cold efficiency while 100 scouts watched. 8 weapons and 180 bullets left. Werner bled. Despite his mangled arm, he manned the heavy turret. The motorcade hit the brakes 200 meters out. He surveyed our line and that ragged family banner. It was just obsolete branding, dead for 50 years. I hit the edge and bellowed, "Eisenstadt, look at me." The Arctic air froze as my shout shattered the quiet. He turned. 2 years ago, his lawyers gutted me. 80 of your soldiers are gone, I yelled. Finished. You have 150. I have backup and steel. I swallowed the lie. Your northern connects just vanished. Klein ran. You are alone. Fear gripped his remaining crew. Or, I screamed, we settle that 3-year-old debt now. Tension spiked. He is calculating, Werner hissed. He loves logic. He sees the gap. For 30 seconds, he just stared. He ditched his helmet, the universal sign of total surrender. I approached the gates, tallying the cost of this win. 180 rounds spent. Our defenses barely held. We kept firing, frozen and determined. Throughout the morning, the bluff worked. That back wall cost 40 gold. Werner was falling apart but refused to leave his post. One casualty today. Peter, 18, my most gifted student. He learned to read at 14, joining us last autumn. 3 weeks back, he made a very specific plea. He wanted to fight. At 18, I let him choose. 2 hours into the skirmish, he was gone forever. They closed in. George signed his name without speaking. Marta logged his final entry in the official books. She wrote, Star, Peter Hausman, age 18, top scholar. Our only reader died in the dirt on March 3rd. Tears blurred my vision. I faced him. Cash, 20 gold. Repairs, 40. Debt, 20. We won, yet we were broke. No mercy, just arithmetic. He walked in, head bowed low. He was a massive man who still commanded the room. He glared, looking like a man who despised the math. We sat down together in the primary meeting hall. Marta stood by. I slid the terms across the table. 1. Borders are set. No more lawsuits or claims. 0 violence. He has 30 days for the legal filing. 2. 1,000 gold in fines to cover my debt. That stung. 3. The October deal is officially dead. We are ending it and notifying every federal office today. I scanned the fine print, desperate for a loophole to save my skin. $1,000, he growled. That won't even pay the electric bill. You're hemorrhaging cash. This whole territory is just a graveyard now. That land was never yours. The temperature in the room plummeted. Some errand boy tried to speak, but I silenced him instantly. Klein is cutting settlement checks for 200 widows today. He's finished. I let the silence hang heavy until it felt like lead. It's all or nothing from here on out. If they link those kills, you'll want a rock-solid story, not a funeral. He hesitated as the consequences finally started to tighten around his throat. He had the vacant stare of someone whose entire world just crumbled. This was a trap. I merely stepped back before the crash, I replied. Naturally, he signed his life away. We watched the ink set. The lawyers followed suit. They were nothing more than walking ghosts. When his 150 men deserted, Werner was the only one who stayed. He clutched the blueprints. Let's begin version 9, he wheezed. The 8th attempt was garbage. This next one is the winner. Give it up, Werner. Maybe the fight's done, but the equipment is still trash. He began sketching. It had been 3 years of absolute hell. I slumped into my father's old leather seat, counting the cost. 3 years ago, we had 80 employees and were drowning in debt. The creditors were circling like hawks, waiting for us to keel over. Today, 1,200 people have running water and a steady paycheck. Schools are open. The highway fees bring in 30,000 every month. The mine earns 60,000. Nobody's starving. Business is booming. Werner is obsessed with version 9. We're pouring the mold this week. We're 40,000 short, but this contract wipes the slate clean. He finally approved the payment to cover that $1,000 deficit. I ran the financials exactly the way she showed me. Marta ran the entire operation with terrifying, surgical precision. She could sniff out a liar from 40 miles away. She maintained a secret ledger for months without saying a word. I pushed for answers. She only muttered something about the final move. I let it go. Werner went back to slave over the forge. Version 9 was our last hope. The 8th had been a total disaster. A single, microscopic error was slowly driving him insane. His physical wounds closed, but his ability to perform was gone forever. 61 recruits joined the program. Only 12 made it out alive. They graduated in February, right before the war actually started. Peter Hausman's identity was etched permanently into the records. His record looked perfect, but his real work remained off the books. Everything was canceled. Most of them just ended up 6 feet under. She hauled the 9th prototype into the entrance hall immediately. These jobs were just pipe dreams back when we were starving. Then Dietrich arrived on Wednesday, and the whole company turned out to be a lie. He materialized at sunset without a legal team or backup, just a shadow on my porch. The refrigerator hummed as his presence sliced through the silence like a serrated knife. "Predators are circling," he croaked. "Our firm?" I asked. "No, the directors." He shoved a heavy, crimson folder my way. No return address, no labels. The vote happened Tuesday. The operation's codename? Project Clean Slate. "This is total warfare." I glared at the folder. "Half the board wants your patents," he muttered. "The rest want you buried before your software drains their bank accounts. Go live and they're toasted." He slid the sealed envelope toward my hand. My signature stared back in dark, heavy ink. "You're the mark," he breathed. In precisely 21 days. My ailing father was sleeping just 1 floor above us. I pictured those remote servers, literally the only safety net I had left. Version 9 was locked. Version 8 was junk. My head engineer had vanished. I snatched the folder and shouted for Sarah. She was already standing there. She'd been eavesdropping. She understood. "I'm on it," she said without emotion. "Seal the grid. Control the traffic." She nodded, already 10 steps ahead. "Jack." He stepped from the shadows. "Deploy 9 before I'm out the driveway." "Consider it done," he vowed. "No turning back." I tore up the legal papers. "Hold on. Find me leverage on every board member, every dirty secret they've ever buried." A grim, chilly grin finally crept across the visitor's face. "I put that together on the way over," he admitted. "I know your breaking point. Watching you for 24 months told me exactly how you would react." I exhaled. "Fine. Let's torch this entire corrupt institution once and for all."